Hi, everybody. I've put together a new format, a new type of format of Magic the Gathering I call Old Souls. And it's anything that was printed on pre-8th edition card frames that is modern legal. It makes 904 cards in the card pool, and it's actually, there's a little bit of everything. Nothing seems super overpowered, and you can build some pretty fun decks. The format's really neat because it includes tons and tons of rares that are like 10, bulk rares. They're super inexpensive, but in this format, it being so limited, they're incredibly powerful. And it's okay to play a 4-drop enchantment on turn 4 or 5 because the games are going to run a little longer, given that there's not these aren't just super overpowered cards where you have Eldrazi hitting the board turn 3. And most of the cards are pretty expensive. There were a couple of promos printed later on that are new cards printed on old frames. I say they're legal in this. But yeah, so I made another video explaining a little bit more and talking through it. I'll put a link in the description. But what I want to do in this video is actually play a game with some of the decks that I've put together using this format. And I used, for this, I'll just use the two decks I like to play with in Modern the most. So I kind of did some modified clones of some Modern decks I like to play with regularly. So the first one is like a black control beatdown deck. It's sort of a riff on mono black devotion, but with no devotion. So it's just mono black control, really. So the deck is 21 creatures, 6 instants, 24 lands, 9 sorceries, and then I'll go through the sideboard as well. But Faceless Butcher is the first creature in the deck. It's 4-drop, which isn't that bad in this format. You're going to get to turn 4 every game, at least as far as I've been able to determine so far. And it's a great card. Obviously, it's a removal spell as well as a decent body for a creature, and can really shift the game in your favor. Festering Goblin, nice 1-drop that has some removal capabilities as well when it dies. So it could block a 2/2 and then kill it with the -1/-1 counters. Graveborn Muse helps this deck in a couple of ways. Festering Goblin's the only other zombie in the deck, and hopefully it's dead by the time this comes out. What this lets me do is it gives me card draw based on the number of zombies I have. And if I have a Graveborn and 1 Festering Goblin out, I'm okay losing 2 life and drawing 2 cards every turn. It's a 3/3 body for 4, and even if it's just out by itself, it's basically Phyrexian Arena with the benefit of being a creature. It can be killed. It's much easier to kill, but there are a couple in the deck in case I need them. And card draw isn't super critical for this deck anyways. Hypnotic Specter. I wish I had the old school picture up with the flying knight. But obviously deals damage to an opponent. The player has to discard a card. There's a lot of hand disruption in this deck. Knight of Dusk is a 2/2 for 3, and it's got this ability where it can kill a blocking creature. So essentially, if you leave 2 mana open and someone blocks this, the creature's dead, which is interesting. It's played okay so far. Nantuko Shade is good early game. It's good late game. It pumps. It can remove stuff. It's a solid all-around card. This is a card I'd never even heard of before I started playing around in this format. It's called Nekrataal, something like that. Nekrataal. And I think of the errata, a lot of these old frames have different creature types. So it's a human assassin. There's a lot of good humans in this deck. Not that there's any tribal for humans in the old sets, but he's a 2/1 for 4, which doesn't sound that great. But he does have first strike, and when he enters the battlefield, he destroys target non-black, non-artifact creature that can't be regenerated. So again, it's sort of like Faceless Butcher in that it's a 4-drop that gives you a two creature swing. Ravenous Rats, old school, hand disruption, good early game and good chump blocking. And the Royal Assassin, just because there's not a lot of removal on a stick in this format, is actually pretty useful at getting rid of anything pesky on the battlefield that you weren't able to get rid of with spells or your Butcher or Nekrataal. And then for removal, I'm playing with Dark Banishing right now. I could play with Terror instead. Those talk about great removal spells. But some creature removal, the ability to, there's really not a lot of good creature removal that doesn't include the non-black creature caveat, which obviously can be problematic if you're playing different types of decks. Funeral Charm is just great utility card, and discarding a card for hand disruption, +2/-1 can be for removal or pump, and then giving a creature Swamp Walk is situational bonus in rare cases. Smother works great in this format, just a good all-around removal for smaller stuff. 4 Polluted Deltas, which came out in, what was it, Onslaught, something like that, so those are legal. 20 Swamps. And then for spells for hand disruption, there's not a lot. There's Duress, and then Blackmail is the only other card I can find that will really do any sort of hand disruption. So with it, I never heard of this card either before, but this player reveals 3 cards from their hand, and you choose one of them, and the player discards that card. So another good card. It's no Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize, but it's decent in its intent. There are some more hand disruption spells that are 3 mana, like Mind Rot and things like that, which I didn't want to get into. And then Vicious Hunger is life gain and damage to creatures. It's essentially the same thing as Disfigure. Not exactly, but gives a creature 2 damage, -2/-2, removes your smaller creatures, and fortunately it's a sorcery. You can't really use it with combat tricks, but it is really useful for the life gain. And then the sideboard for this deck is 2 defense grids for control decks, burn decks, things like that, and then just all around disruption. Tormod's Crypt is graveyard disruption. Dredge, you can't exactly play Dredge in this format, but you can certainly do a lot of neat things with reanimation type effects, big creatures or zombies. So 2 of those will be helpful. This is a sweet card. Obviously, Relic of Progenitus kind of, there's a better card, but this is a pretty good backup. Enfeeble, this is really your Disfigure equivalent. It's an enchantment, so it's not instant speed, and it's 2 mana instead of 1, but really not that bad. And then Darkness, another card I'd never heard of, is like Fog for black. So prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So that could be useful for a number of different situations and token decks and big aggro decks, things like that. 3 Befoul, it'll remove a creature, but it's really for the land removal for Tron and other places where where exotic lands are going to be a problem. Gaea's Blessing is really only in here for the shuffle your graveyard into your library effect. Believe it or not, Mill could be something in this format, so I threw it in there just in case. Infest for creature decks, little weenie decks, and then 1 Mutilate for anything really big and problematic on the battlefield. With 20 Swamps, this is pretty easy to get out there at a decent level. So that's the first deck. That's the black deck I'm going to play with. The other one is a riff on red deck wins. So it's a Goblin deck using some effects to try to chisel in some heavy amounts of damage quickly. It's not that different than red deck wins, just a little less powerful because some of the cards, a bunch of the cards you need aren't in here. Gablin Pathfinder and things like that. 2 Coates Farms, great late game. I only run 21 Mountains in this one, so it doesn't necessarily make it on the board every time, but it's a solid card to have, especially if you have 3 or 4 goblins on the battlefield. 4 Goblin Kings. Obviously, if you're playing goblins, this is a great card to have in there. Goblin Piledriver is legal in this format, so excellent card to have in here. Super fun to play with. I have Goblin Raider in here. I just need another goblin. I want a bigger body. It can't block. I might swap it out for something else. But I need something in a 2-drop slot because a lot of this stuff are a lot of these cards are 3 drops. Goblin Warchief just got reprinted in Dominaria, which means it's now legal in the old Souls format I've come up with. So that obviously quickens the board a bit. I don't have tons of goblins that are more than, that have a, well, I guess I have a fair amount. Never mind. Giving them haste is really powerful here. Mogg Flunkies can't attack or block, but it's a 3/3 for 2. And with all the Raging Goblins I have in here, I can get these guys attacking and blocking pretty quickly. Mogg Sentry is an awesome card. I mean, if you try to kill it, it immediately becomes a 3/3. It's really great. If you try to kill it with what was that? What's that card called? Vicious Hunger. It's immediately a 3/3. It doesn't go away. You put a -2/-2 counter on it. It still hangs around for the rest of the turn. It could attack or block, or I guess it could attack. Or block. It could block. So this is a really fun card. I hadn't ever played with it before, but I definitely would add it to my Goblin deck, like an old school Goblin deck. 4 Raging Goblins, 1/1 haste. You gotta have them. And then Siege Gang Commander, also new in reprinted in Dominaria. I think it was printed in 10th edition, some other editions as well. Great finisher. And it's definitely come in handy a few times. And then the rest of the deck, 4 Lightning Bolts and 4 Trumpet Blasts. Lightning Bolts for removal generally, or maybe that last little slap in the face for damage. And then Trumpet Blast is sort of my answer to some of the effects in other decks where goblins are getting +1/+1 or +1/+0 when they enter the battlefield. There aren't a lot of great enchantments or pump cards in the format in Old Souls. So you end up, this was really kind of one of the best options. I used to play goblins with like Goblin Shrine and things like that, which I was surprised haven't been reprinted in a modern set yet. But this works pretty well. 21 mountains. You got to have about 4 mountains on the battlefield for this deck. You got to have at least 3, but 4 is ideal because you can drop a Raging Goblin and a Trumpet Blast in the same turn, or drop a Goblin Warchief and a Lightning Bolt or something like that. And then Browbeat. This is fantastic card advantage, or it's 5 damage. It's for 3 mana. It's a pretty solid card. It's hard not to have. And then Goblin Grenade is probably your finisher in this deck. You're really trying to attack quickly in the beginning of the game before the opponent can get a board going, and then Goblin Grenade them with 1 or 2 remaining goblins. The sideboard, 16 cards. I must have clicked on one of these by accident, but 4 Bad Moon, or Blood Moon. Not necessarily a gimme in this format like in Modern, where you're almost definitely going to have modern lands or non-basic lands. But if they do, the Goblin King gives everybody Mountain Walk, and this is a double whammy. So it's mana disruption and instant damage, and then some pump just in case I'm going against some decks with bigger creatures, tempo decks where I'm gonna have to worry about 3/3s and 4/4s on the board before I can handle them. And then got some removal spells, a lot of removals. Relentless Assault I haven't boarded in yet, but I feel like it would be really good, especially if I've got a Goblin Grenade and I can get an extra 4 points of damage in and then grenade them. It's kind of the last 10. 4 Shatterstorm seems aggressive. Let's knock that down to 2. Destroy all artifacts. Sowing Salt lets you remove a non-basic land, then search their library, graveyard, and hand for other versions of that land and remove them. This is great spot removal for a creature, especially big ones later in the game. Stone Rain, more land removal. I haven't decided if I like the 4-drop for Sowing Salt or the 3-drop for Stone Rain yet. And then Wildfire, again, just a big disruption, board wiper type of spell. So those are the two decks explained, those kind of deck text behind them. And then from there, we'll get into a game. So thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on the decks and the format. Again, the format's called Old Souls, and it's any deck printed on it's any card printed on old frames that is modern legal. So it's still modern legal, still play with it in a bunch of different formats. And I think there's going to be some really powerful decks you can create out of this. They're not going to be tier 1. Well, you might get some 1.5s or something, but there's a lot of neat cards in this pool. So anyways, yeah, love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Like and subscribe if you like the video. And next one, I'll make a video of actually playing the deck and get a feel for what it's like, how the games go. So yeah, thanks a lot.